Hello, everyone. Welcome to another week of LSM's Corner. This is the May 15th edition, and the featured subtopic this week is space, but there's also mostly WOB questions. Uh, for starters, to give you guys just an update on both the status of the healing of my hands and wrists, as well as um, when updates are coming. So my wrists are finally starting to show some non-trivial progress. So up until now, every week it's sort of been like they feel a little bit better, but not much, a little bit better, but not much. This week I'm finally starting to feel like there's some noticeable, really noticeable improvement. They're not where they need to be yet, so I still have to rest them. But if they progress quickly, as I'm hoping they will, perhaps starting next week I'll be able to get back to work. I'm optimistic about that. It looks good. Assuming progress continues this week, I'm going to be resting them as much as possible, and we'll see how that goes. And then to correspond to that in terms of update schedule, let me see exactly here. So right now is May 15th. This week I'm going to have to push out an ASAP update because some supports were submitted where it came to my attention that builds are still able to two-shot, at least cross-spec. So definitely that's not okay. Being able to two hit someone, and by my definition of two hit, just to be clear, what that means here is I don't include boosting and then using two attacks. I count that as a three hit or a three shot. So two shot is just you use two abilities and the other person is dead. So I saw some instances of that. There was somebody who has um, Berserk Residual Core doing 8.7k unboosted with a recoil, which is not damage that I consider acceptable for a Residual Core user when you consider the fact that they're going to get like 66 or something percent damage on top of that. Not acceptable. So I'm going to look into it and see if that's a problem unique to the combination of Berserk and Residual Core, or if it's something unique to Residual Core, or if again all damages. But this time I feel like the problem is probably more localized to Residual Core or Berserk and Residual Core. So I'm gonna look into that, figure out exactly what the problem is. Because this is such an urgent problem, I consider being able to two-shot to be a very urgent problem. I'm gonna be looking to get a fix out for that this week. Probably not gonna be including many other fixes in that update. Um, but yeah, definitely gonna have to get figure out, do some testing on that over the course of this week, and get an update out by the end of this week to resolve that. Then what I'm also looking to do is tentatively scheduling update 2.6.8 for about the 25th to the 26th. And I'll give you guys more information next week on what all is going to be into that. We have sort of a lot of changes. Some of them are more substantial than others. I don't really want to give too many details yet because, again, with the status of my hands and history working on stuff is still a little bit in flux. We're probably going to look to get that update out on about the 25th to 26th, and then we're gonna get the event features done. We're looking to get those done by the end of this month, and then we should be able to run the event. Hoping to run the event starting in very early June. So maybe we'll run it starting June 2nd. Um, if everything goes well, we'll be able to start the event on June 2nd, and then we'll run it for a week or less, probably about a week, and then we'll after that we'll be looking to do mostly tournament prep. Um, the 2.6.8 update is going to include probably more balance changes as well, regardless of what goes into this week's sort of urgent update. And then probably by the middle of June, we're going to be trying to have all balance changes locked down by around June 15th. Maybe let's see what the second week of June is. So the second week of June ends on the 17th. We're probably going to be trying to get all balance changes locked by sometime around the 16th to the 18th, so that there will be 1 to 2 weeks of June, about 2 weeks of June left over, where our balance changes will be locked and people will have that time to sort of figure out their strategies before matches start around June 1st, or July 1st, sorry. More details on the tournament will be announced in June. I'll be having to, write up the specific rules and everything, determining exactly who can enter, who can't enter, et cetera, et cetera. There's some general things that I've already stated before. There was a question asked about those, so I'll go ahead and answer that later in this corner. Read on if you're interested in those details. But the exact details will be revealed in June. Now, moving on to the questions. Let's see here. Starting with future update feature questions. Vizard is one of the most interesting topics that I haven't heard anything new in a while. Maybe there is nothing new, or maybe there is and it just hasn't become word as the bird. What are your current ideas and plans for Vizard as of this very moment in general? How will the moves look? What will be so unique about this race that will make me want to go hard or even harder to join it? So the reason you probably haven't heard anything new about Vizard is because I'm not actively developing Vizard. I have some rough plans. By rough, I mean sort of general scope plans of what I want to do with Vizard, but there's some significant things that I'm going to be putting a lot of time and effort into deciding exactly how they should be. That includes abilities. That's probably going to be one of the major things. Abilities, how exactly the Vizard mask should work. There's some details I've already decided on the Vizard mask. Like Vizard mask is going to have a fixed turn length. Like, you'll be able to use it for like 10, 11, 12 turns in the battle. The number of turns you can use it will increase with training your Vizard skill. And then it's going to have some powerful boosts. The current plan is the Vizard mask is probably going to have static boosts. So like every Vizard mask is going to have similar boosts. You're going to get some things like maybe it gives you some movement, some range, some teleport, some raw offensive stats, maybe some healing over time or something like that. The which boosts exactly it has not been hammered down yet. Those are just rough ideas. So I can't really commit to saying what any of this is going to be because it all has to go through testing. We have to develop an initial idea, we have to try it out, and we have to see how that works. And when I say try it out, I mean on dev server. So we'll try that out. We'll see how it feels. If it needs changes, we'll change it. So it may end up changing 2 or 3 times before we get to the version that we release. That's why I can't really say exactly what the details on everything is going to be. It's just something that we have to wait until it's actually developed to see. And that development was going to be looking for later this year, maybe around October, November, December. Next question, are pop-out window chats or socials in our future? Um, hmm. So I've had an idea about this where you would be able to dock any chat, included like this could be like mixed chat, or it could be an IM conversation or like a group chat. You'd be able to like dock it to the page, somewhere on the page, and then you would just sort of like stay there wherever you go. But from a technical perspective, this is actually somewhat difficult to achieve within WOB's current structure without creating some other potential issues. So depending on what changes we end up doing to WOB in order to also technically enable having a mobile app, this may be something I can do sooner rather than later, but I wouldn't expect this feature soon. I'm definitely planning it to do it eventually, but there's some serious technical hurdles that we'll have to cross first that expand beyond just that feature. Next question. LSM, have you even considered adding a certain mechanic that lets you spawn an AI on your side? Something like necromancy? Or perhaps you can get different level AI by developing or leveling up that ability. So I've thought a little bit about summons. Eventually, I'm probably going to do them in some form, but I'm not entirely sure what form. I don't want to just throw summons in for the purpose of having summons. I need to find a way to make them relevant. So this is probably going to also tie into if I do research into Quincy, if they have anything that's relevant to that, it might end up being something with that. Um, I'm also sort of in the process of doing some additional thinking on the battle system in general. And based on that, I may go one way or another. Summons weren't really a major part of Bleach outside of people summoning their Zanpakuto spirits. So apart from that, and I guess you could sort of count like Stark with Lunette, or there was the whole Bount arc, but Bount arc was not canon, and I'm not planning to implement Bount into WoB, so those summons wouldn't make sense. So yeah, I mean, summons can be a cool idea, but sort of depends. I'd have to find a way that makes sense and also adds meaningful gameplay. So we'll see. Looks like that is it for the future update and feature questions. The next section is going to be game questions. First one, how do you make lots of money? Okay, so just I'm assuming this is in game, right? So in-game, how do you make lots of money? What really helps with this is doing a lot of AI and or feeds or patrols. It's just a matter of doing a lot of them, keeping on it. Do them in Kyoto so you get the extra gains. Do Kyoto Underground Arena on top of that. And it really helps if you can be in a fraction that has increased money gains from like patrols, feeds, or from AI. And you do those when you get them. It also helps to be higher rank because the higher the rank you are, the more money you get. But the short answer is there's no magic bullet to this. You just have to find things in game that are the most efficient for your time. For instance, if you are low level in the rank you're at, you just have to do patrols because you're not going to be able to efficiently grind out hard AI. So, but if you're, strong, maybe you're capped in your rank, maybe you just do a lot of hard AI, especially for the first 15 bonus of the day. And then after that, maybe you do patrols, maybe you do Kyoto Underground Arena, squeeze in some soul hunting, figure out which things give you the most efficient gains for what you're able to do, and just do a lot of that. Do it on the weekends too, because weekend boost and boss boost affects the money gains. Next question, will AI eventually have the ability to do insane combos and tactics with elite squad moves? Okay, so I'm not sure about insane combos. I definitely have some plans for AI. For instance, AI are going to learn how to do immolate combos for one, and probably barrier and knockback combos as well. Then outside of that, in terms of the existing things, I'm going to give them a little bit more strategic power. But AI, I'm not planning to make these AI like genius top level PvPer tier AI. I want these AI to be as good as, let's say, your average competent player who fights here and there. They have a good concept of the battle system. They have a good concept of some basics, some intermediate strategy, but they're not sort of in the advanced tier. So the AI in terms of intelligence and strategy are probably going to be more around the intermediate tier. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add mechanics specifically to like bosses, maybe the Kyoto Underground Arena, where the AI are going to have mechanics that only they can use, so even players don't have them. Or they'll have like really overpowered moves, but there's a tell so that you can counterplay them ahead of time. One example to that is a boss, for instance, might have, let's say, a 50 square knockback, but it doesn't have that high of base power. So if you get hit by it, you'll probably instantly die, but there'll be some tell or an interval or something so that you'll be able to know and you'll be able to use a barrier or something to defend against it. That's just one example of a tactic. I'm probably going to add, I don't know, maybe 10 or more of those to bosses, sort of unique things that they can do that you'll have to play around. Okay, next question. This person actually submitted a few questions. I'll go ahead and answer them. What are the effects and power to determine a custom's move power? It's an interesting question. So effects and power to determine a custom's move power. I'm not sure if this is referring to when you create a custom move or you change your custom move, what goes into determining the power, or if you're talking about how it scales with levels. Both of these are pretty visible. Um, what happens is when you make a custom ability in the custom creator, uh, the more range it has, the lower power it's going to have, and the more effect it has, the lower power it's going to have. Now, different effects have different what's called power cost. The power cost means for every percentage of effect, this much power is deducted. So that changes based on the move, the effect. And weakness probably has a different one than nerf. Knockback has a different one. So I'm not sure exactly how knowing that formula would necessarily be useful to you. You can pretty much see any combination of what you want to do by just going in a custom creator and plugging in the numbers and seeing what power it gives you. If you're talking about the levels, what the ratios there are, for effects, you're looking at level 100, the effect is going to increase by 1.2x for a normal ability and 1.4x for a self effect. So to clarify normal versus self effect abilities and team effect abilities, their effect increases by 1.4x at max level. Everything else, attacks you hit the opponent with, AoEs, etc., that increases by 1.2x at max level. Now, if you release Bankai or Resurrección Segunda Etapa, you get an extra 10% bonus on top of that, but that stacks multiplicatively, which means that your 1.2x for a normal ability will become 1.32x. And for a self effect that is normally 1.4x, it would be 1.54x. You can see these in the green and blue numbers when you look at an ability in your sword page. So this should give you a visualization. Next up, what methods are you currently working on to prevent stalling methods for my rank at least or all ranks? If you are making them, when can I expect them to hit live? Okay, so the person who asked this question is rank 6, just to be so we know about, my rank versus all ranks. And the answer here is there's two ways I'm approaching this. One way is isolating particular effects that pose a problem, like bind is one of these. And I'm probably going to be making changes to bind. I think sword binds have just a little bit too low cooldown. When you look at the other binds have like 6-7 turns cooldown, and sword binds have like a 5 turn. There's no real reason for it other than when I increased the cooldown on the shop ones, I just didn't increase the cooldown on the sword ones yet. So I'm probably going to be increasing the cooldown on sword binds to 6 turns. I also might be reworking the bind global cooldown. Instead of putting a global cooldown when you cast it, I might make it so that when somebody gets hit by a bind effect, they're immune to bind effects for 3 turns after. That way it sort of eliminates some bind stacking, some bind ice AoE stuff. Because ultimately, here's the thing. Regardless of how strong it may be, having your movement taken away and being unable to move or do much feels pretty frustrating. So I can put some limits. The bind is definitely still there and it's a viable option. Given the cooldown of movement boost at like 7 turns, you can usually play around this. Although I may have to evaluate this again when Stealth Squad becomes more popular again after I add more things to that. But for right now, the 5-turn bind is definitely pretty overpowering, and the ability to just someone movement boost, you just hit him with the ice AOE and stack that on for another bind effect. Kind of makes things a little bit problematic. So I may be um, making bind work like that with sort of a 3-turn immunity when one hits you instead of a 3-turn global cooldown. It sort of accomplishes the same thing but in different ways. But ultimately, I think it'll probably overall feel better. The only downside to that would be it's less clear. A global cooldown, the person using the bind will know exactly, but I'd probably have to add a thing for when you get hit with the bind. It would say, add a text to the battle saying, player so-and-so is now immune to bind effects for 3 turns, or something like that. Next up, what are the pros and cons of a custom ice AoE? What makes it weak and what gives it power? Effect, power, what are the details to it? So making it weak. So the obvious answer here is if you increase the effect amount so that you get more bind, the power goes down. Of course, you can see that when you're creating the ability. The only other real non-obvious answers here, I guess, are what gives it its offensive and defensive power, which the answer to that is intelligence, spirit skill, and Neryoku skill increase the damage of the ice AoE. And then Spirit Skill, Neryoku Skill, and Willpower increase the defensive power or the health of it. Offense boost applies to both of those, but on the defensive aspect, if you're over 65% offense boost, it gets diminishing returns. So, next up, what are the prizes for this year's tournament? Can you give me the details, which includes the name of the item, percentage effects, and the function? So, we may go with similar items to last year's. That's still something we're sort of debating on. The sort of default option would be to give similar items to last year's, which if we go that route, what the last 2 years of item rewards have been is you get an item that has dual resist equal to your rank times 2. So if you rank 4, you get an 8% dual resist item. If you rank 6, you get a 12% dual resist item. If you rank 8, you get 16%. But we may end up doing something different. We may go with the same ones, so we're still going to see. The prize also, there's a shard prize for I think first through third finishers. So on top of the item, you always get shards as well. And the next question: how will the tournament work for my rank, MPVP or just PvP? Do you get to choose the item you win for your rank? You do not get to choose the item. But as far as MPVP or just PvP, there will be both. You can enter in the team tournament, which is going to be 3v3, or you can enter in the solo tournament, which is going to be 1v1. You can actually enter in both as well. The other details as well, but since this may be asked, if you have multiple characters, you can enter multiple characters. However, you can't enter 2 in the same rank. So like you can't enter 2 rank 8 characters, you would have to pick one. The reason for this is if you enter two rank 8 characters, there's the possibility that they might end up being inadvertently scheduled against each other, which would obviously create a bit of a problem. So to just completely, take out any relevance to that, we're just going to not allow you to enter two characters in the same rank. But you can enter, if you wanted to enter one rank 8 character in the 1v1 tournament and a different rank 8 character in the MPVP tournament, that would be fine, because those are considered sort of separate divisions entirely, and what you do in one does not affect the other. Next question, Immolate. It has your attention and it has mine. What do you have in store for Immolate at this very moment? What changes can I expect to see, or more so, what change options do you have in mind to implement? I still have to run more testing on this to see. It's a little bit tricky to see if Immolate is a problem with damage numbers being really high, or if it's something else. But if it does turn out that Immolate is too strong, the possibilities, and again, this is if, because I have not confirmed this yet, but if Immolate is too strong, I would have to analyze whether it's specifically the 15% Immolates, the 35% Immolates. Those are the two that people run. They either run 15%, which focuses on having a lot of raw damage and also triggering the extra residual. The key part with this is if you only have one residual active, the 15% Immolate will still do the residual damage that's active, but it won't apply any bonus. Normally in Immolate, when you have two residuals active, we'll apply a bonus based on the effect amount times the number of residuals. So if you had a 35% Immolate, and you had two residuals active when you Immolate, you get 35% times 2 is 70%, and that becomes bonus damage. So the entire remaining damage of those residuals gets multiplied by 1.7 to form the immolation. With the 15% immolate, if you only have one residual active, that doesn't happen. People are still using it because it sort of allows them to get the damage that's already there out a little bit faster. But an option, if that ends up proving to be the one that's too strong, is I could increase the minimum from 15 to 20%, which what that does, that reduces the power of the ability because the more effect it has, the less power it gets. However, increasing that percentage does not actually increase the damage of a single residual immolate because, again, a single residual immolate gets no benefit from the immolate effect percentage. So that would be one option. The other option, if it looks like both of them are a problem, would be potentially a little bit of a increase to the power cost of the immolate, so that it subtracts more power from the ability per percentage of immolate in the ability creation. I'm not sure what of those options I'm going to go with, or if I'm even going to go with any option. Again, I have to do more testing to determine exactly. Next question, Elite Squad abilities. I understand that the whole purpose of having Elite Squad abilities is to actually be in the squad to have them, but do you ever see yourself adding them to the custom sort option to have, but with some penalties that make it costly? I don't think so. I think the Elite Squad abilities, if I made them able to be added on customs, it would add a whole bunch of extra things, or people could create combos that would be potentially abusable. It also takes a lot of coolness away from the Elite Squads. I think they're much better kept being in those Elite Squads so they're a part of your identity. The next question, do you have any new moves coming to any of the Elite Squads? If so, what are they? I don't. The one currently that I have planned is Team Health Leech for the Medical Squad for Melee, but I don't have that one implemented yet. I'm going to be looking to get it in before the tournament so that people have that option for team fights. The reason it has been delayed a bit, I've explained this in the past, but basically, since Medical Squad is by far the most popular, I didn't want to give people another reason to feel like they were being punished for being Stealth Squad. So I've been working on plans to help out, give the other squads more attractive options, and make sure their moves are viable before I add in that extra benefit for Medical Squad. Next, how does dual nerf work exactly? It's one of the boosts I know nothing about, and I am no longer willing to try a new boost unless I get a direct explanation from the man LSM Jidoka himself. So dual nerf, core boost specifically, what happens is when you hit your released and you hit your opponent with a direct damaging ability, this means not an area residual, you will apply dual nerf effect for the core boost percentage for 2 turns. So let's say your core boost percentage is 66%. That's the maximum for a rank 8 legendary. You would apply 66% dual nerf for 2 turns. Now, the way 66% dual nerf works is it will first subtract from your opponent's offense. So let's say your opponent has 50% offense boost, If they have 50% offense boost, their damage multiplier would be considered 1.5x or 150%, because 100% is sort of your normal, your base damage, and boost adds on to that. So let's say they have 150% offense boost and you had 66% nerf. Your 66% nerf will first subtract from their offense boost. So it'll take their 50% boost off. That also uses up 50% of the nerf effect, which leaves 16% left. The remaining 16% takes their offense and lowers it below 100%. So it would actually take them down to 84% offense boost, or multiplier rather. Sorry, 84% offense boost is the wrong term. It takes them to a 0.84 multiplier, if that makes sense. So to show exactly what that would do, let me run the math. You can determine this math yourself if you open a calculator. The important thing to understand when you're talking about nerf is you're reducing their damage multiplier, which normally is 1.0, and it increases based on their offense boost. So 50% offense boost adds 0.5 offense boost multiplier, which means if you have your normal 1.0, you add 50% offense boost, or 0.5, their offense multiplier is 1.5. Now 66% nerf is going to take 0.66 off of that. So 1.5 minus 0.66 is 0.84. Now if you want to see how much damage reduction that actually is, you can just take the 66 and divide it by their offense multiplier. So 0.66 divided by 1.5 is a 44% reduction. This is why the nerf effect amount may seem very large. It's actually just to make it balanced in comparison to other effects because of the amount of boost that people run. Hopefully that makes sense. Next question. Dual resist is supposed to be the counter to ultimate knockback if you don't have shield. I see you tweaked ultimate knockback but haven't changed dual resist in any way. Do you ever see yourself changing dual resist? If so, how? Or if not, then why wouldn't you? I think dual resist is mostly okay. In terms of the ultimate knockback changes, the ultimate knockback changes actually don't really change the damage. What I basically did to the knockback was I lowered the effect amount, but I increased the damage per square. This change was to make it so in the situations where knockback was being used more as a stalling tool or just to get people away so you could flee, it wouldn't send them as far away. But in the situations where people are using it for damage, the damage is actually unchanged. If you do the barrier trap into ult knockback combo, the damage is the same as before. So it doesn't really, not really affected that way. But about changing dual resist, there are a couple options I could go with. One I've been thinking about is I could lower the effect of dual resist on swords, but add more static defense boost. And then what I could actually do is take the diminishing returns on dual resist and lessen the restriction so that you get more scaling out of your dual resistance. That would mean that higher dual resist amounts are more valuable, and the same amount of dual resist would provide you more damage mitigation. But the sword core boost ones, they would be decreased. This would make dual resist moves a bit more effective, although I'm not really sure if I'm going to do this change because it has some sort of wide-reaching impacts. So I would have to do a lot of number crunching on that to determine if it's the way I want to go or not. Next one, who do you think will be top tier in rank 6 tourney based on what you have seen? Top tier is going to be trouble to deal with, hard to beat, etc. I haven't watched a lot of rank 6 fights lately. The names that always sort of go around, there's who is there? L Sword is one of the stronger R6s right now. I think there were more, but they ranked up to rank 7 and 8. I think people are training up new rank 6 alts, so it's a little bit hard to say. You may have some dark horses because people have been training up new rank 6 alts just for this tournament. So it's kind of hard to give names right now. We'll see. Next question. I've noticed a lot of complaining between players in regards to specializations, some being overpowered while others seem to be near impossible to make viable. An example of such is the defensive specialization. Statistically speaking, defensive specialization users are below the term minority in the game, as older veteran players do not see the advantages of these specs and encourage new players to pick any spec that falls into the aggro category. The question is, are there plans to remedy this? It would be really great if our playstyles weren't limited because of specs being inferior to one another. So in terms of defensive spec actually being inferior, I've made a lot of changes to make sure that that's not really the case. I've given defensive specs a lot more options. One of the recent changes I did was lowering the clearing power of barriers to remove barriers being able to override each other, because this was providing an additional counterplay to go against the ultimate knockback combo, which is one of the strongest tools of a defensive player. So what people would do is the defense player would use a barrier trap around the opponent, but then the opponent would just use their own barrier and it would override the line of barrier between them and the defensive player, which prevented the defensive player from using their knockback because they couldn't hit through the barrier with it. So I nerfed the barrier clearing power so that it wouldn't be able to do that anymore, so that knockback can be a more reliable option for them. I've also made a number of changes to defense. The static defense boost static to swords, added to swords, will scale with defensive stats. So that's nice for defensive players because obviously they have more defensive stats. And I've done another number of balance tests just to check out the spec, and it seems to actually be pretty competitive, more so than some people think. But in terms of older veteran players not seeing the advantages of those, I am planning sort of a larger scale spec revamp where I want to provide more differentiation. I can't do this before the tournament because there's not enough time to do it, flesh it out, find all the niches, get everything balanced. There's not enough time to do that, so I don't want to do such a major change. But I'm probably going to be looking to do it later this year, sometime after the tournament, or early next year. It's quite possible that I might try to do this before Vizard. But I definitely want to focus in on what's the identity of each spec. What should being a melee offense player feel like? What should being a spirit offense player feel like? What do you want to? What's their goal in the fight? What should their goal in the fight be? And what do players want to be doing? If you're a spirit user, in theory, you use magic. So what should it feel like to use magic in a fight? And then what I have to do is I have to reconcile. If you're a spirit user using magic, right? How does that differ between offensive and defensive? What's the middle ground and balance? And then I have to manage how does a spirit versus spirit fight feel, as well as how does a spirit versus a melee fight feel. I want to sort of rethink. I want to approach all of these from the ground up and think about them from a fresh start and see if there's any ideas that I specifically want to apply. This doesn't necessarily mean all specs are going to be completely changing, but I'm going to be approaching them from a fresh perspective and thinking about how in an ideal world these should work, and then seeing what changes from those ideas I can apply to the game. Next question, help dual nerf Plaws. Yeah, so I'm probably going to be increasing the length of dual nerf to 3 turns. Dual nerf has enough struggles right now with the, especially on second turn, because it becomes sort of hard for them to defend against if they have to take a hit without putting their dual nerf on first. I may see if I can figure out a solution to that. For now, the quick and easy way is at least to make the dual nerf effect last 3 turns, so that in battle there's not as much risk of, suddenly your dual nerf effect you had applied on the opponent runs out and you're left very vulnerable for 1 turn. So dual nerf would also be helped if I ended up doing that other change I talked about, where I increased the static defense boost on releases a bit, and then reduced the effects of defensive boosts, because then you'd be a little bit less reliant on it. Next question, LSM, you should make AoEs the way they were. It was better when the AoE would go through a person and not stop. I can see how that's more enjoyable, but the new system both has its pros and cons. I decided to make this way so it is consistent for MPVP, and ultimately in a 1v1 fight, it actually sort of works out because let's say you can still bind somebody, and I increased the effect on the shot bind so that it can reliably fully bind someone into an AoE if they don't use a movement boost or anything. But this actually has its benefits because with the way attacks stop at the player, if you're inside an AoE and somebody dissipates, when the dissipate hits you, it won't continue past you. So it'll leave AoE squares behind you that you can still move into. So there's sort of a benefit to it as well as the downside. Next question. Now it has gone by a year and a few months into the new battle system. What do you feel so far about it? Did it succeed in the ways you intended? What are the things you wish you could go back and change? I don't know if I would go back and change anything. I mean, obviously, obviously I'd take the progress I've already made and, put it in on release. But if I were in the same shoes as I was then, like that's not really possible unless I had the knowledge. So I guess if I traveled back in time, I would just, re-implement the current progress I've made on it. But some of the notable things, I guess, Immolate was really broken when it first came out. It's kind of ironic that we're back to Immolate again, Although some of the core problems of Immolate have been fixed. It was amazingly broken when it first came out. You guys may feel like it's strong now, and it may indeed be a little bit too strong, but it's certainly nothing like the powerhouse that it was when it first came out, where it was just destroying fights, completely destroying fights. So in terms of success, I think in large part it was a success. It's certainly a major upgrade to the previous system, where melee and spirit were mirrored and the fights were less interesting. Especially, I think just being able to move around and attack feels a lot better than having to choose between the two. And a lot of the other dynamic effects and combos have proved to provide interesting interactions for players. It certainly has more progress to go. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I want to sort of think about how melee players want to fight, how spirit should feel in a fight, how melee should feel in a fight, how they should feel against each other. So I want to take a dive deeper and start giving more identity to things rather than just, oh, I can move a little bit farther, or I have a little bit less range. I want to give more difference in feel there, and also more difference between offensive and defensive. um, those differences are there. Like the way a defensive player fights is going to be somewhat different than an offensive player. But I want to add more cool stuff, add more uniqueness, make it more interesting. Next, this looks like a suggestion. Level 40 should be exempt from invasion teleportation, getting shot back to Soul Society or Hueco Mundo since they literally serve no offensive or defensive purpose during said invasions. So for starters, if they weren't, they could just go attack the enemy's base, which wouldn't really be fair. Also, this is supposed to be part of the reward of someone breaking the opponent's base, is you keep them out of Kyoto City. So you get that during that time frame, which is fairly short. It's only like 20 minutes. You get Kyoto City to yourself. Your players that normally might be scared to train there get to use it freely. So it's sort of one of the rewards. So, and I don't want to jeopardize that by adding a weird exception for level 40s, which also doesn't make as much logical sense. If everybody else is getting sent back, because they're in danger, the lower level people would be recalled too, because it would be even more dangerous for them. The only way that would make sense is if I made them able to be attacked by anyone in Kyoto City, which would not be very fun. Next one, the price of the mystical shops should be set to rank tiers, ergo the higher your rank, the higher the costs. If this is already the case, the costs need to be lowered just a tad, 30 to 40%, as it seems a bit pricey for R4s at this time. I'll look into that. Let me make a quick note. I actually want to rework the mystical shop a little bit, but let me see if I already have an issue for it. I do. Okay. Check if prices are too expensive for low ranks. The prices are supposed to be a bit expensive though, because mystical shop is something you do when you have a lot of money. So you have more things to spend that money on. Um, so in some ways it's supposed to be a money sink, but I will double check that. Next, some form of notification when AP hits 100% is long overdue in my belief. As a follow-up, the AP to Souls conversion rate should be looked at as it seems a tad low. You can actually make a lot of money from AP to Souls. And AP is free now since you don't use AP for anything else. So I don't really want to... I think if I sort of help that out too much with either of these things, both notifying when AP hits 100% or adding the AP to Souls, upping the AP to Souls conversion ratio, I think that would blow the market out of proportion. Inflation would be ridiculous if I just added more ways to get free money like that. Next question, I might be wrong, but after much testing, it seems Spirit gets the first turn about 90% of the time versus Melee. There is nothing in the code based on specialization that determines who gets first turn. The only effects on who gets first turn is speed. That's the only effect, is speed. Speed versus speed, and randomness plays a part as well. But it all averages out to speed. Next question, Kyoto Underground Arena and Soul Hunting AI don't count towards frac dailies. That's intentional. I specifically want those daily bonus AIs to be the arena and desert fights you do. I don't want to have them affected by other things, so I can balance the other things separately compared to them. 6, rank 4 melee needs a second CR. As things are now, it's more useful to CR and simply pure away after. Since we get no immolate bonus, immo becomes near useless and CR highly situational. No immolate bonus. you should be able to get a immolate bonus. You don't need compound residuals to be able to immolate. I believe, I'm going to double check this right now, but I believe there is a second residual. It may be a rank lower, but melee rank 4. Yeah, you have a residual from the previous rank, which it's a little bit weaker, but it should still be good enough for the purposes of um, proccing and immolate. I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe another one should be added, but for the moment, you can still do that if you want the combo. It looks like the power on it isn't too bad, and it's like 5.5 power, and I mean, I guess it's a bit lower than the quick barrage, but for purposes of the immolate with 20% bonus effect, it might be worth it. I can test that out and see to make sure that that combo feels okay, and maybe move the rank 3 residual up in power a little bit. Next question. I have been playing World of Bleach for a little over a year now, and I am just now getting to 150. I was trying to start PvP, but I just can't seem to beat anyone no matter what I try. I'm melee aggressive, and I am trying to actually be a viable fighter to the race, but all I can seem to do is deal a lot of damage to the boss. This being admirable, but then I turn to look at the posts in chat where someone is fighting a member of the opposite race and needs help. I go out to help and still end up getting killed myself. I oftentimes find myself going into the chat and asking for help, and my question ends up starting a race argument or debate. I can't figure out what to do and can't pick out a single thing from what is said. So my question to you is, what is the most viable option for me, a melee aggressive player, to pick and expand on and make it to where I can help my race? I need help with cores and moves, mainly things to deal with people whose XP extremely outranks mine. Thank you. So I will say, once you get to about 300 million XP, the remaining XP is less relevant. So when you first get to 150, you're still going to struggle a lot, but when you get to about 300 million, you get your melee skill cap, you get your strength capped, you get 5th or 6th movement square, which is 600,000 or 2 million movement skill, especially when you get the 6th one. The 6th one helps a lot against spirit people. Without 6 movement squares, it really sucks fighting spirit at rank 6. So you want to get that if you're struggling with spirit people against other melee users. Strategy against some of the top level PvPers is going to be hard. I'm not going to lie, and that's something that you're going to have to figure out with a lot of fights. And you sort of need stats to be able to get those fights on equal footing. The other thing you have to get is you get your primary defensive stats capped. So you need your endurance capped, you need your willpower capped, you need in addition to melee skill being capped. Once you have melee skill, strength, and endurance capped, and then you get your sword skill to 390,000, so that you get the enough cost reduction. And then you also want to have, like I said, movement skill to 2 million, so you get your 6th movement square. And then you should sort of be able to do decently against other rank 8 melees, depending on your strategy. Also helps to have a seed item. But strategy becomes very important when you get to that level, and then if you're against spirits, you also want to make sure you get a lot of spirit skill, probably around 1.5 to 2 million, so that you have sufficient defense against them. The popular meta strategies, melee boost core and dual resist core, and then there's options. You can make melee weakness core work. Melee weakness, you could actually, one of the things for dealing with people that can outdamage you is knockback ultimate has static damage. So if you can pull off a knockback ultimate, your offensive stats don't matter. I don't know if that's the best option to go for melee aggressive. I would probably just say hang in there. Ask a single high level player of your race. Pick somebody who's is really good with melee or something. PM them and ask them for tips. That should be better than starting an argument in chat. Just say, hey, these are my cores. What would be some good options for me? And see what they have to say. Just pick somebody. You can probably look at Race HQ and look at the top 5 fighters and pick someone out of there. If you follow things, you should pretty much know who those people are melee and who are spirit. Or if not, you can ask them. But pick someone who's, is good at PvP, get some tips from them. And then stick in there because it's still going to be a bit hard. When you get to 300 mil XP, you should start being able to get some meaningful fights in and learn from those. And don't be afraid to lose a fight in order to win and gain some knowledge from it. Right? But you have to understand that if you have a stat difference between you and the other player, that stat difference is going to make them seem overpowered, even if they aren't necessarily their build isn't necessarily stronger than yours. So make sure you get your stats up and then learn from as many fights as possible, and talk to some people that get a lot of PvP kills, and check out their build, see if they'll help you. Make sure they're from your race though, because people are really secretive with that cross race usually. Next question. Oh, that looks like the end of the game questions. So the next questions are going to be the miscellaneous questions section. First one, when did you start getting interested into space stuff? Okay, so I've been really interested in space ever since like probably I think I was around 10 or something when I first looked into like, everybody going to the astronauts going to the moon. That was so cool. Learning that the people had walked on the moon, like that was just tight. But after that, I was like kind of into space, but didn't follow it really strongly until around when was it? I want to say about 2014, 2014 or 2015. Maybe it was 2015. But that was when I started really hearing about what SpaceX was doing with their plans. SpaceX is it's really exciting to me now because SpaceX is like flying reusable rockets. It's actually crazy. SpaceX has accomplished like historical feats in space, and they're a private company. So they've managed to successfully launch an orbital booster into space, carrying the second stage. So the orbital booster is the biggest part of the rocket. It's like I think 140 feet tall or something like that, and 12 feet wide, and it weighs like 1,000,000 pounds or something on its own. Maybe less than that, but it weighs a lot. It launches the second stage, flips around, comes back to Earth, flips around again, and lands. Like you got to understand, this is the size of a narrow skyscraper. It's the size of a 12-story building, a 10 to 12-story building, and it's flying up 62 kilometers into space. It actually gets up to 130 kilometers, which is 80 miles or so, before it completely turns around and heads back. And they do all of the math, all of the calculations. It's incredible to see this. And they have other really big plans. They're planning a space capsule, which would be the first of its kind because the space capsule is the part that carries the astronauts. It sits on the top of the rocket and it carries astronauts up into orbit or to wherever. But most space capsules up until now, when they come back to Earth, they use parachutes and they land in the ocean. The SpaceX Dragon 2 that they're working on would be able to not only use parachutes, but it also has its own engines, so it can land on land with rocket engines. It doesn't have to use parachutes and land in the ocean. And this is the kind of stuff that makes me excited. Firsts, like, making historical progress in space again, the kind of progress that hasn't been made in 50 years. This makes me really excited about space. Going to Mars, humans going to Mars in my lifetime, gets me really excited. And these are the start of plans that SpaceX started revealing and working towards and showing progress in around 2014 and 2015. SpaceX was actually founded in 2002 with the ambition of driving down the cost of spaceflight to make traveling to Mars like viable. And they've revealed plans for a massive, massive rocket, far more powerful than any rocket in existence, that would be capable of taking 100 tons of cargo to Mars. So it was pretty much when I started looking into their stuff and finding out about their plans that I really got excited and started following everything that's happening in space more. Next question. When you started out WoB, did you have any backup plans just in case the game didn't become a success? No, because I started out WoB just as a hobby. I was never expecting to be able to make a living off WoB. I didn't I didn't expect that until years after WoB's existence. Actually, um, I didn't really fully realize that I was going to be able to make it. I figured that I might be able to make a career out of game development around mid to late 2011, which is like a year and a half, close to 2 years off of WoB. But I didn't think that WoB at that point was going to be what I could use. I didn't realize until maybe 2013 where the income from WoB surpassed the income from my day job in a single month. It fluctuated for a while, but one of the months was higher than the income I'd made from my day job, and that was just like, whoa, this is actually enough money to where I could, potentially do this instead of my day job. Um, but certainly in 2010, like I had no expectations. I was just making the game in my downtime for fun, and because I wanted to make a game, and that was it. So if the game hadn't become a success, I just would have said, okay, that was cool, that was fun. I'll go do something else now. Next question. LSM, I just wanted to let you know that I'm overjoyed about all the work you've done for the past 5+ years. If it wasn't for Shinobi Shadows, I wouldn't have found my way to WoB. I'd probably still be overly depressed, still playing the Panama RPG, all miserable and stuff. Thanks. P.S. Shout out to Celarose for submitting this question. Um, I'm really glad that WoB has been able to give you some fun and maybe even more than some fun. Give you a place to talk to people, have some friends. That's the kind of those are the kind of things that really make me happy when I'm able to sort of actually meaningfully make something that somebody enjoys to that level. So I'm glad you enjoy it, and I'll keep working hard on it. Next question. Do you think we'll find aliens in space? I think there's two possibilities. One possibility is there are aliens, but they're really far away. And by really far away, I mean thousands upon thousands of light years away, which is like if the Earth was a hair on my head, right? In fact, our entire solar system, like the Earth and all of the other surrounding planets, if that was the size of a hair on my head, these other planets would be off the screen. If that gives you some sense of perspective, like a single hair, a single hair on my eyebrow, right? If that was the entire size of our solar system, these planets where the aliens are would be off the screen. Just mind-boggling distances away. And the reason for that is since we haven't discovered aliens yet, and aliens haven't discovered us yet, right? Because that's the other thing. Then if they exist, they would have to be so far away that our current technology has not been able to explore far enough. And we've explored pretty far. So if that's the case, that they're just that far away that we haven't found them and they haven't found us, and none of even our communications have hit them, then likely they're so far away that we won't be able to find them until we radically improve our spaceflight technology to be able to travel light years at a time. Or we improve to the point that we become a multiplanetary species and we slowly start branching out over the universe. But with the way human lifetimes work, when you're talking about light years, when you're talking about thousands of light years, that literally means first we have to make a spacecraft that's able to travel the speed of light. That's ridiculously hard. For comparison, current spacecraft travel maybe as fast as, let me think about this, maybe 30,000 miles per hour. 30,000 miles per hour, right? The speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. Per second. Let me put that into perspective. If you were traveling the speed of light for an hour, right? You would travel 669,600,000 miles compared to today's spacecraft, which travel 30,000 miles. So you've got 30,000 miles, 670 million. That's the difference in speed that our spacecraft technology has to bridge that gap before we're able to make meaningful progress into the rest of the galaxies. And so that's what we have to achieve. And then even then, it would still take 3 generations maybe before we'd get to the level of solar systems that we haven't been able to explore today. So if there is life out there, probably we won't be able to find it for thousands of years. Next question. There are so many kinds of meats out there, but the most chewiest of them all was the Wookiee steaks. If you could go to any planet, real or fake, like from Star Wars or from anime or Star Trek, what would it be and why? Let's see. So, real or fake, like from Star Wars or anime or Star Trek? I don't know about planets. What planets have I seen in anime? I don't remember the names of a lot of planets. I guess. I mean, Tatooine is like the classic one from Star Wars, but I don't actually feel like. Okay, actually, there were some places on that would be really nice to visit, or not Tatooine, but what was the name of her Padme Amidala's planet? I don't remember the name. Let me check Google really quickly. Padme Amidala planet. Naboo. Naboo had some very beautiful landscapes, so I'd probably go to Naboo, even though it would mean meeting Jar Jar. Next question. I've been liking this guy for months, and yesterday he told me that he was lucky to have me in his life and would hate to see me leave. Should I go to a pool date with him or just move on? Um, Lucky to have you in his life and would hate to see you leave. That probably suggests there's a little bit more going on there than just friendship. So if you have the opportunity to go to a date with him and you like him, then go for it. Next question. Do you prefer to be dominant or submissive? Is this a sexual thing? I feel like this is a sexual thing. I'm not going to answer this question from a sexual context. I'm just not. But in a more general sense, do I prefer to give orders or take orders? I would say I usually end up leaning towards giving orders in most things. I ended up teaching martial arts. I ended up running a game. I ended up being a supervisor at my old job. So I guess I would say I lean more towards giving orders than taking them. I also hate working for other people, so maybe that's a thing. I mean, I don't really hate it, but usually I don't like people overly dictating what I do. Next question. Do you happen to know the time it takes for someone to become an astronaut and what tests they might have to undergo for it? So, the time it takes to become an astronaut, I haven't done detailed research into this, but I know it's a process of years. You go through years of training. In terms of tests, the major test I know about is you have to undergo a G-force test, where they put you in. If you've ever been to a sort of like a carnival and you know those wheels, they're kind of shaped like a diamond. You get in and you lean against the side, so it's like a circle like this, and you're against the side, and it like spins around really fast, and the things like slide up. So they put you in something like that, and it's a G-force simulator because you have to endure intense G-forces going up to space. And if you can't handle that, if you get nausea or you black out, then they won't send you up into space. Other than that, I think there's some basic physical fitness requirements because you need to be in pretty good shape muscularly because when you go into space, you will lose muscle and bone density. So you need to be able to work out and you need to have some good starting baseline. Otherwise, it could become you could face really severe side effects when you get back. So you have to be in pretty decent physical shape. And some other things about the training they do. One interesting thing, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but astronauts will often train in water to simulate weightlessness. And they'll usually train in most of the common procedures that they'll have to do. Everything in space, especially in the space station, is very tightly controlled. They don't wing it on anything. Just about every action they take is meticulously planned out. So a lot of the potential actions that they'll have to face, even like replacing parts of the spacecraft that they'll be in, the space planners plan for so many contingencies, and the astronauts have to train on how to operate all of this equipment, how to replace equipment because they often have to replace equipment in space, um, how to operate controls from a thick spacesuit. They train on all kinds of things, and it takes I think probably 5 to 10 years of training. I think is about what it takes to become an astronaut. Don't quote me on that. I don't know the exact time, but from what I've read, that's the best guess I could make. Next question is HAARP real? Never heard of that. HAARP. High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program was an ionospheric research program jointly funded by the Air Force, Navy, University of Alaska Fairbanks, DARPA. Okay, I guess it was real. Let me see about these conspiracy theories. Various individuals have speculated about hidden motives and capabilities of the project. Deployment of HARP as a military weapon. Well, it doesn't seem under debate that the development of it was real. Are you asking if the conspiracy theories regarding it are true? That's really hard to tell. I mean, I would say more, but some scary government men would probably show up at my door, and I might not be able to keep working on WOB. So I'm just gonna say no, 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 nothing funny was going on there. You shall not pass. Next question: if you were a rover rocketed to Mars to take photos, would you take selfies? Yes, naturally. I would have to, take photos to show the commanders back at base my current physical condition in case there were any damage. So, yeah, I'd probably take selfies. Next question. What was your highest level ever in Skyrim? Probably in the 60s. I think I have a character in the 60s. Something like that. Okay, looks like that's it for questions this week. Thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you next time.